Okay, so when we want to find the domain of this composition, we have to remember that the radicand, or whatever's under the square root, has to be greater than or equal to 0. So we actually have two radicals that we have to deal with. So let's look at the inner one first. We need to make sure that this inner square root is greater than or equal to 0. So we can set up the inequality x minus 3 is greater than or equal to 0. So when we solve that, we add 3 to both sides and we get x is greater than or equal to 3. That's just the first part. But now we have this large radical. So the radicand here would be this entire expression, square root of x minus 3 minus 3. And that also needs to be greater than or equal to 0. So let's set that inequality up. The square root of x minus 3 minus 3 is greater than or equal to 0. And we solve. So we add 3 to both sides. We get the square root of x minus 3 is greater than or equal to 3. Then we square both sides, and that should give us x minus 3 is greater than or equal to 9. Finally, we add 3 to both sides, and x is greater than or equal to 12. So now we have to interpret these two solutions that we just found. So the first one tells us that x has to be greater than or equal to 3, and the second one says x is greater than or equal to 12. We have to go with the most restrictive one. For instance, we can't use this domain because if we pick something like 4 and we substitute a 4 in here, 4 minus 3 is 1. The square root of 1 would be 1. But then 1 minus 3 gives us a negative number. We can never have a negative value under the radical. So in this case, this is our domain. X is greater than or equal to 12. Another way we can write that in interval notation is the interval including 12 from 12 to infinity. I also want to note that in some cases you will get a combined inequality. So one of these may be a less than. So you may end up with something like, I don't know, 3 is less than or equal to x is less than or equal to 12. But that's if they're in opposite directions. You have to do some interpreting. But that's not the case in this one, so don't worry about it for this problem. But when the two inequalities are in the same direction, you have to interpret, play with a few values, and just see what makes sense.